Good.
Welcome to ACAP Guilford's monthly meeting. We're so glad to have you join us. For those of you who are not familiar with ACAP, let me just give you a brief description. ACAP Community is an educational 501c3 nonprofit organization that offers information, resources, support, and community for those of us who are caring for our aging parents. As you can tell from our name, our focus is on supporting adults as they care for their aging parents. However, all caregivers are welcome, whether you're an adult child, another relative, a friend, or a professional. Each of our 9 ACAP chapters, which are located across the Eastern Seaboard, offers monthly programs that address issues related to aging, family dynamics, and adult-child caregiving. Presenters are experts on the topics they address, and many are or have been caregivers for their own parents or in-laws. ACAP Guilford meets on the third Thursday of each month. Beginning in February, beginning next month, our meetings will be at midday. Come at 11:30 for lunch and stay for a program and discussion from 12 to 1. Our meetings take place at Senior Resources of Guilford at 1401 Benjamin Parkway in Greensboro. We encourage you to come face-to-face so that you can participate in conversations about the meeting topic and meet with other people who are living your same life. However, for folks who simply can't participate in person, you can view our programs on our Facebook page and the ACAP community website. You can also watch past programs from all of our chapters on our YouTube channel. We would like to thank our sponsor for tonight's program, the Age Coach, for its support of ACAP in Guilford County. The Age Coach, Dr. Cheryl Greenberg, provides support for seniors and their families as they experience life changes. With her guidance and support, clients who are dealing with health issues, including dementias, learn about symptoms and changes, strategies for caregiving, and navigating the feelings that arise with these illnesses. Through open and confidential conversations, seniors and their families gather information and become more comfortable in addressing their illnesses. Clients who are reaching for new roles and adventures, such as retiring or finding new activities or relocating, have the opportunity to explore possibilities and plan satisfying futures as well. Thank you to the Age Coach for its ongoing support of ACAP Guilford. Now let's turn to tonight's program. We would like to hear from you, so if you're in the room, raise your hand if you have something you want to say or ask, and if you are live streaming, go ahead and put something in the chat. Tonight, our program, The Importance of Being Socially Engaged and Active, addresses a topic that is relatively new to our understanding of aging. We're learning that spending quality time with others is not only pleasant and rewarding, but it's also important for physical and cognitive health. And we are very pleased and appreciative that Alicia Kaplan, a licensed clinical social worker, will lead our discussion tonight. Ms. Kaplan has been the Director of Jewish Family Services of Greensboro since March 2023. Before that, she was an AP Associate Professor at UNCG in the Joint Masters of Social Work program, where she served as the Co-Director of Field Education for almost 10 years and as an adjunct professor for 6 years prior to that. Alicia has also worked in Forsyth and Guilford County Departments of Social Services, in child welfare, and her own private practice in Greensboro, where she still provides clinical supervision for those obtaining their clinical licensure in social work. Ms. Kaplan, welcome.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. Glad to be here. All right. Well, I wanted to have a sense of who we have in the room with us tonight. I don't know if folks online are able to put names and information in the chat, so you're welcome to do that as well. But I thought if folks wanted to tell me a little bit about yourself, so your name, what you're hoping to learn or get out of this training today, and maybe a favorite hobby or activity or a fun fact about you. So I am Alicia Kaplan. I'm hoping to make more connections and share some resources with all of you this evening. And a fun fact about me is I also used to work at Walt Disney World and Disneyland Paris. So Mickey was my boss, Mickey Mouse. So.
Yeah, Kathy?
My name's Kathy,
Hi, Kathy.
and I'm just hoping to learn more about what senior services are available
Sure.
in Guilford County. What little family I have is from up north, so
Okay.
I'm sort of alone down here.
Yeah.
And I guess my hobby or biggest activity is I work with Love Rescue, who rescue dogs.
Yeah.
And I take in a lot of their hospice and medical dogs
Oh, that's
to
wonderful.
take care of. So that keeps me busy, and that's probably my most active group.
Yeah, what a wonderful hobby. Thank you for sharing.
Hi, my name is Brent, and I work here at Senior Resources of Guilford as a family caregiver specialist. What I'm hoping to learn tonight is actually just to gain more tools for my toolbox to be able to help the families that I work with. My favorite hobby or activity would be attending live music events, big or small.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Pleasure
Sure.
here.
I'm Eileen. I work at the Elder Law Firm, and I am the Elder Care Navigator there. I am also on the leadership board here at ACAP, and I am here tonight as a lifelong learner, and also to support you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Well, my name is Bruce. I'm with Griswold Home Care. We provide services generally in the home to help folks just remain active and independent. And certainly, I love the topic of engagement. That's such a big need as many of the folks that we work with feel isolated and depression and things of that nature. So I know how important engagement and activities are. Gosh, and probably a fun hobby of mine would just be to travel, and just see the world a little bit. So
Absolutely.
looking forward to doing that a little bit more.
Thanks for sharing. Dr. Greenberg, do you want to go? Okay. Okay, so some of what we're going to go over today. We will talk about some of the challenges that are faced in older adulthood that can lead to some loneliness and social isolation. We will talk to that relationship between social engagement and health and well-being. Some of the signs and symptoms, what to look for in terms of loneliness and social isolation. The role of leisure, recreation, and community engagement in the process of healthy aging. And how to find some of these community programs, both in your community and online. All right, so a lot of times we're going to talk about some of the challenges of aging in older adults, but what are some of the things, what are some of the strengths? What are the things that you bring, that you learn as you age? So what are some of the things you might think about in terms of strengths of older adults?
Experience.
Experience. Yes, there's nothing about, you get so much, there's nothing that can teach you life experience but life experience, right? Absolutely. What else? Wisdom, the wisdom of our elders. I think, unfortunately, our society in general doesn't really value it as much as I wish we did, but absolutely, wisdom.
Time.
Yeah. Tell me more about that.
Well, you have time to more, not necessarily leisure, I guess leisure time that you can put into activities and projects and that sort of thing.
Absolutely. You finally maybe have the time you've always wanted
Yeah.
to do some of the things you love. Yeah, absolutely. Other thoughts?
I think one thing is, I think older adults tend to value relationships to a large degree, right?
Yes.
They've either have some lifelong relationships that they cherish, or maybe they've lost some relationships along the way and
Yes.
kind of have that, miss that.
Yeah. Well, welcome. We're glad you're here.
Thank you. Got one more coming.
Okay, fantastic. Glad to hear it. So, well, I think y'all did pretty well in terms of some of what we were saying were the strengths of older adults, right? We mentioned wisdom. I mentioned creativity. I think sometimes as folks age, they get more and more creative with using their time, with the wisdom that they bring in life. We were talking about relationships and the importance of those relationships. And the time maybe also goes along with some of the awareness of what are the most important things in life, right? Sometimes we get so bogged down with minutia that it's as we age that we realize, you know what? All those things I was so worried about maybe are not actually what was the most important things in life. Balance, finally you get that life balance of, again, about time. Where do I have the ability to put the things in to either take care of myself and take care of others and do the things that I really care about. So, and then some of those life course changes like retirement can give you the opportunity to have that time. So yeah, other things that maybe we missed? Strengths, older adults as we age.
Say judgment.
Judgment, it's a great one. Yeah. From
I guess
all
that
of that
ties
life
to wisdom.
experience
Ties
and
to
wisdom.
ties to wisdom.
Yeah, but that our judgment can get better as well. So we're gonna sort of pack those up and take them with us as we look at some of the challenges as well, because I tend to be a little bit strength-based, right? So even as we have challenges, these are the things that help us get through those. So what are some of the challenges that older adults tend to face that we might think about?
Mobility,
Mobility, absolutely.
cognitive changes.
Cognitive changes, doesn't have to be, but it certainly can be. Could be. Isolation, right. So we mentioned relationships, sometimes it's that other side that you long for them and can't have as much as you wish. Yeah. Ageism, yes. Thank you for saying that. That is so true, especially in what I tend to think of American culture. Yeah.
Loss of loved ones.
Loss of loved ones, absolutely. Good, y'all are naming lots of them, so.
It's just the physical inability, maybe it's, no longer drive, or maybe it's,
Yes.
you don't have the mechanisms to actually get out and
Not a loss.
experience.
A lot of loss of independence with some of those barriers that get in the way of things.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we've mentioned a lot of the ones already, right? Let's see what we haven't mentioned. Income, sometimes as we start to be on which can happen lifelong, of course. But especially as you get to be on a fixed income, it can be difficult. And another barrier of how do I pay for all the services and supports that I need as I'm aging. We mentioned cognitive health, right? Mental health, right? We tend to think of I tend to think of the 3 Ds, depression, delirium, and of course now I'm also misremembering my 3rd D. You're doing it next to dementia, which.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's my presentation this month.
Yes, I remember seeing that on your flyer. So we mentioned transportation. We are in this post-COVID age, so I think there can still be some anxiety about returning to the world after having had this very strange, unusual, almost hermit life-like experience where we all started to be a little bit more secluded. So there can be sort of this post-COVID inertia we have to get over to sort of re-engage in-person things, right? Versus these online things which are available, which are also wonderful to have as a resource. And yet sometimes we don't get those connections from being in the room with folks. So, and so we mentioned life course changes like retirement as a strength. It's one of those that I think is both. For some folks, it's a wonderful strength. They love having time to finally do the things they've always wanted. Many folks finally travel when they've retired, right? For some, it can also be really challenging. They no longer have a purpose every day in life. Right now, I don't know my identity. I always identified myself as what I did. What do I do now that label is removed? So many of these challenges, others that we're not thinking of or haven't named yet. Okay. So what is social isolation? What is it that you think of? Doesn't have to be a fancy definition. This one's not.
It's the inability to connect with other people outside of your whatever area that you're in.
Exactly, that inability to connect with other people. And I tend to think of, there's sort of two types, right? There's one where they want to connect and socialize, but from many of these barriers that we talked about, they can't do it, right? Either they don't have transportation, we don't have the physical ability to get there, they don't have the funds or the finances to get there. And the second type is where there's not this desire to socialize, or it's a little bit too overwhelming. And especially in this post-COVID world, I think sometimes we have the two together, where you have someone who really feels isolated and alone and wants to engage. And when they do engage, it's too overwhelming. So it can be difficult to navigate those situations where they really much want to connect. And how do we do it in little bite-sized, small pieces that are not overwhelming or overstimulating?
I think with number two, I think it's increased, not just with older adults. I think it's,
Yeah.
across age groups when you look at civic participation and, religious participation. I mean, we are a more isolated society by and large
Yes.
across
And
ages.
I will try not to get on my soapbox of the capitalism individualist nature that we've created, and that it's making it so much harder to not have a village on multiple levels, on single parents, on caregivers, of all these different ages, because I think we as humans need to be with other people. We need to be connected to others. And when we have these separate, isolated situations, it makes it difficult. And then we get this inertia where, we're comfortable, even if we're alone. And social media gives us this very strange connection, but not. So it's kind of gray. Okay, so if we're looking at signs and symptoms of social isolation, if we're worried about someone, okay, they enjoy being by themselves, they say they don't want to engage, at what point are we concerned? At what point do we say, you know what, let me intervene a little bit? What might be some things that we're looking for? Depression, absolutely.
People who are socially isolated can describe themselves sometimes as lonely.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes loneliness. And depression can look different in different people as well, right? Some folks are going to be really tearful, others might be more withdrawn, and some might have suicidal ideation, right? For some, it's going to be more severe. Yeah. So yes, absolutely. Some folks are going to be more withdrawn, not going to want to engage. And you can sometimes start to see physical differences in the way someone holds themselves as they become withdrawn. Not always, but sometimes you almost see them shrinking away from you. Not making eye contact, giving very short, curt answers, right? When you're asking, how are you? Fine, okay. Right. So even when someone is offering to connect and reach out, even that situation itself feels withdrawn. Increased anxiety or irritation, right? We can see this, that everybody does all the time is irritating. Even if you're lonely and you're wanting to connect with folks, when folks do connect, sometimes you're frustrated and irritated by it, which sort of then pushes folks away. So you have this catch-22 that can be a little bit complicated, again, to navigate. How do we support folks? So I see some nods of recognition. Yes. We mentioned depression and suicidal ideation can be a part of that. Still, the population most likely to complete suicide are those 65 and older.
Is that a significant statistical difference?
It is. I mean, the next is going to be youth. So, but sometimes you also see reduced appetite, right? You can see insomnia or hypersomnia, right? Folks can't sleep at all, or all they do is sleep. So you can't get them out of bed, can't get them to engage. Poor self-care, what might that look like? What might poor self-care look like for someone?
Stop bathing. and
Stop
grooming.
bathing, they're not grooming. Yeah.
And it also goes to more serious, well, I think I don't know if it's more serious, but not attending to medical conditions, not addressing some of those things in the beginning of your list.
Yes, all of those things are a big part of self-care, right? Yes, thank you for saying that. Yes, all of those things are very true. That it can also be the other activities that need to happen within the household that aren't happening. Bills are piling up, they're not getting addressed or tended to, mail's not being opened. So again, we can, even with social isolation, we can start to see cognitive decline when we're not engaging with other people. Again, I think as we're built as humans, we are made to live in tribes and communities. We're made to be with other people. And when that doesn't happen, it impacts our brain. We're not getting those neural connections. We're not firing the same way. So it's like we're not getting the little workout for our brain that it needs in order to stay sharp when we're not talking with other people. So we can start to see cognitive decline. We can start to see that they'll have difficulty concentrating on small tasks. Difficulty remembering can all be part of or linked to social isolation. And of course, it can exacerbate already underlying conditions, right? So if folks already have significant mental health, if there already is a tendency towards depression, if you have more significant mental health needs, bipolar, schizophrenia, right? If you have it can exacerbate those pieces as well. Same with physical health or cognitive conditions. So if you already have those underlying conditions and you're not getting the social piece that we need in order to function, it's going to make all of those things much worse. So in terms of the importance of social engagement, right, it does change the brain when we engage socially. One of those cool SAT words, neuroplasticity, right, that our brain is flexible and fluid and constantly changing throughout our lifespan. As we continue to engage socially, it helps build those connections. It helps keep us sharp. It improves circulation and blood pressure, right? It'll lower blood pressure. If blood pressure is too low, it'll keep it up enough so that hopefully you're not going to be passing out, right? It can improve mood, right? Again, we are social creatures, even if we like to be alone. There's nothing wrong with being an introvert. There's nothing wrong with, especially in the winter, right, that Norwegian concept of hygge, right, that we all get huddled up and cozy by a fire and a good book and a cat on your lap and a cup of tea, and there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. One of my favorite pastimes. And we do want to make sure that we're still getting those connections as we go through life. It improves our outlook on life, right? So, of course, I don't know if folks are familiar with cognitive behavioral therapy or CBT. It's come under fire a little bit recently because it can, like with anything, it's not just the technique itself, it's how it's done, right? And so you don't want to blame someone, well, you just need to think about that differently and then your life will be all better. And there are some situations where that's just not going to necessarily help. It's intense and severe enough. And our outlook can impact our mood and can impact our ability and our desire to connect with folks. So it is one of those things that can be helpful if it's done in a supportive way where folks feel like, yeah, you're right. Maybe if I take that same situation and look at it differently, right? That, I only have a neighbor that comes by once a day to check on me. Otherwise, I'm alone all day. Versus, I have someone that comes every single day to check on me. How lucky that I have a neighbor that cares that much. Just that reframe can be such a small thing to have a better outlook on life. And improves longevity, right? Again, these social connections literally improve our physical health and longevity by connecting with other people. So it's definitely worthwhile. So we were talking about this sort of post-COVID inertia and how hard it is for folks to start to engage. So it can be as small as 15 minutes a day to start to see some of these positive health changes from engagement. So it doesn't have to be that someone's out of the house all day, right? It can be a phone call. It can be a neighbor stopping by. It absolutely can be more formal activities, but it can be small if it feels overwhelming for someone, both who wants to engage and feels alone and feels overwhelmed by too much social engagement. It can be small. It doesn't have to be a lot. Being willing to accept help from others. I think, and as someone in the helping profession, right, we often attach so much importance to giving help. But when we give help, right, some folks really enjoy it, and there's that feeling of being altruistic and almost that volunteering high that you can get, right? And so if others enjoy doing that, we also have to be the one that allows for that to happen when needed. And if we attach value to giving help, then there's a value in receiving help. So I think also some of that reframing of how we can accept help, and that I think it's brave to give and courageous and kind to give help. I think it's brave and courageous and kind for yourself to receive help. So sometimes encouraging folks to receive help can be a big thing too. Let someone come over and visit you. Let them in the door. Let them bring you dinner. They enjoy it, right? They enjoy making you food. It's how they show love. So you can give back if you can. It's a great way to engage. It makes us feel better, right? Doing volunteering, continuing to work, even if it's in small pieces, right? If you have retired, sometimes folks come back and do a presentation. They come back and do childcare. They come back and read stories to kids. They come back and do something in their field that they love and enjoy. To give them passion and help meet the world's need, I think is where that sweet spot tends to be. So moving your body in some way. It can be small, right? There's chair yoga. You don't have to get out of the chair if that's difficult. Tai Chi, taking a walk, a roll, sitting outside, rocking chair, right? There's something about just moving our body in some small ways that can make a difference. It's one of those that also we start to get endorphins in our body as we move and exercise. And again, it doesn't have to be a whole lot. I don't know if anyone has watched any of those series on Netflix about blue zones, right? The folks that are centenarians, folks living, these communities where folks are 100 years old or over and seem to be sort of living together. And many of them, it's because there are several things going on that they were looking at. One of them is being really physically active. And when I say really, it's not, again, America loves to do things so intensely, the insanity workout, powerlifting, which is fine, it's great if you want to do that. But most of them were walking lots of places, or still had gardens and were bending down every day to pull up weeds. Some folks were still able to sit on the floor if their culture ate on the floor, right? They were still sitting on pillows on the floor, getting up and down every day. So there was movement as a part of their ritual of everyday living. Makes a huge difference. Spending time outside, right? So which is harder when it's cold or really hot, when we have these temperature extremes. So if it's too hard to get outside, we have these nature windows, right? Where you can watch the Nature Channel 24 hours a day. I love seeing birds. So it can be, if you can't get outside, are you able to position yourself to look out a window, to watch wildlife, to watch birds, to watch people? I love people watching. It can be so fascinating. I mentioned at the beginning that I worked in Disneyland Paris for a time. So when I would, go into Paris for a day, I would bring a book and sit at a cafe, and I would end up not even picking up the book because I was just people watching. There's just something about being outside in movement that I think can be helpful. So, reigniting old passions in new ways, right? So sometimes when we talk about some of those losses and folks say, oh, I can't do X anymore. Well, is there a way to do something similar that you're passionate about, right? So if, like I mentioned chair yoga, if someone says, oh, I used to love dancing and doing yoga, I can't quite do it anymore. Is there a way to modify it, right? Or I loved being an artist. Well, like we can do arts and crafts. There's all kinds of things that you can do. Even if you're not painting in your studio any longer, we can bring things to you. It can be flower arranging, right? It can be really small things that you do. Or develop totally new ones. Sometimes folks say, well, I used to do this. I was a rower, right? I was out on the water. Can't do that anymore. But I always wanted to learn some new languages. Maybe I'll learn a new language. It could be a totally new passion of something you never got a chance to do, and now you're hoping to get a chance to do it. So, self-care. So I have the hyperlink here. Hopefully this will work. Take me to it. Oh, all right, we'll go to Google. Oh, because I'm not online. That would be why. Okay. I don't know if I can even get to my other folders now that I think about it. Yeah, I could do that. Good idea, thank you.
My experience with Wi-Fi.
So I'm like, I'm not online. See if it works now. I should be able to just pull one of these up here. There we go. Okay. Folks, see if I can make it bigger. Okay. So when we talk about self-care, a lot of times folks, what do we tend to think about when I say the word self-care?
Take
Hygiene.
Physical.
Hygiene, physical,
Fitness,
fitness,
nutrition.
nutrition. Good, good. When I say it to social workers, they tend to think of self-care like, oh, I'll go get a mani-pedi and a massage, right? Which is certainly something you absolutely could do for self-care. But it's a lot more complex and has a lot more facets than it could be expensive self-care, but it doesn't have to be expensive, right? It absolutely does not have to be expensive. So yes, it does include the physical, right? So we see on here that you have safe housing, right? Getting regular medical care, eating, nutrition, right? Getting enough sleep. They do have like taking vacations on there, taking time off. It can be massages, bubble baths, turning off your cell phone, having some protected me time, physical affection. So it can be all of those things, right? Absolutely. That's one section of the self-care wheel. So there's also psychological self-care, making sure you have time for self-reflection. You have time to maybe engage in therapy, right? Or journaling, sitting with emotions, self-awareness, sensory engagement. It could be doing something creative or expressive, gardening. Someone mentioned support groups, reading books, thinking about your positive qualities and attributes. So certainly spending time with that psychological side of self. So there's also the professional self, right? So they have, I know they have it sideways there, but like taking time for lunch, setting boundaries, not necessarily working overtime, leaving work on time. So if someone's retired, it might be just sort of checking in for professional needs in terms of that professional self, right? That we talked about maybe doing some type of presentation or giving back in some way. So it may or may not be a larger need if the professional self isn't sort of looming over the other areas of life. Emotional, right? Sometimes folks really need affirmations. It's one of the first things out of the gate. I used to always tell my students, if you're working with someone, the first thing you're gonna do is affirm their feelings, validate those feelings. Imagine other LCSW in the room, right? So, and if we're working with older adults, I just think that's one of the most important things is connecting with someone's emotions and saying, wow, yeah, that I could see how that would be really difficult to handle. Instead of going, well, you've got all these other things going on. And not that you might not get there, but having that emotional affirmation. And if you're not necessarily getting it from others, they have self-love on there, right? Making sure you're checking in with your emotional needs. What does your inner child need? Saying, I love you, laughing, watching a funny movie. So some people do those like positive mirror quotes, and they say beautiful things in the morning to themselves. So just those various emotional needs. And then they also have personal and spiritual. So sometimes it is, what do you want in life, right? With the time you do have left, what would you like? And so sometimes it can be difficult to try to figure that out for someone. I'm still a fan, Gina might be too, I'm a big fan of the miracle question, right? So if I'm working with someone and I'm trying to figure out what they really want, if tomorrow, overnight, a miracle occurred and life were exactly the way you wanted it to be, when you woke up, what would be the first thing you'd notice that'd be different, right? What would be the next thing you would do? What would you notice? What would it smell like? What would you taste? What would you be wearing, right? And as you start to hear this descriptive of what their life would be like and what they want to do, that gives you sort of that's the ideal picture, right? Can we move back from that a little bit in manageable things that we could actually accomplish, right? So is there something where they say, oh, well, I would get out of bed, I would eat pancakes, I would be able to see all my grandchildren, I would take a walk down to a cafe and I would sit and watch people, like, so whatever it might be that lets you, okay, so you want to be able to get out, you want to be able to see family, you want to be able to people watch at a cafe, you want to be amongst bustling energy, right? That gives you some idea of what it is that folks might need or want, and it can help them figure it out possibly for themselves if they haven't been in tune with that before. So, and some folks have a spiritual connection need, right? For some, that's religion. For others, it's sort of more individualized practice. But just making sure that we're looking at all of these different aspects of self-care, and that folks are considering these different aspects for themselves too. Does that make sense? Am I losing folks? Thank you for your patience in letting me pull that
Learn
out.
who you are when it's funny, under personal.
Yeah.
Under personal.
Yeah, learn who you are. That's true. Figure out what you want in life. Sometimes people, I don't know what I want. So, and I learn to play guitar. Learn to play anything. Yeah. So, okay. All right, here we go. Other ideas, other things that you have come up with, either for yourselves, for your family, for clients, for folks you've worked with, that have been helpful in terms of engagement.
I think that these are wonderful suggestions. And as I sit here and listen to you, I think every one of these things could be done with someone else. And that you said how important socializing is. Figuring these things out, and how do you have a buddy to do it with? Or a group to do it with is really important.
Absolutely. You could do every single one of these things with someone
Maybe you
else.
should.
And maybe you should. Yeah. Yeah.
I think we underestimate the importance of neighbors.
Yes.
I see it in my own family's life.
Yeah.
I think about it from growing up, and I also compare, like, my in-laws live in a place where the lots are much bigger and everybody has fences and there's no sense of community in their little cul-de-sac. And I compare it with our street and just out walking, or as I pull out of the driveway in the morning and give a wave. It's engagement that matters, builds up.
Yeah. Absolutely. I do think as we have larger communities where the land is larger and your neighbors are farther away, it makes it much harder.
I think about it too in terms of rural areas.
Yes.
Certain rural areas where these engagement and isolation issues are, I think, harder in some ways.
That's very true. It does make it harder. And again, it's sort of a mixed blessing to have online social media computers, because sometimes you can engage with an online group. You could do a book club. You could do some of these things if there's another way for you to physically get there. But it's also not the same. It's not the same. And they did some research, again, from the pandemic, gave us a lot of information about, as we all sort of became more isolated and weren't engaging, that it was a lot of the conversations that we tended to have with strangers, like your cashier in the grocery store, where you just, oh, how are you? Oh, I love that sweater. It's so cute. Oh, I got it. And such. Those were the things we missed, because those wasn't what was not happening anymore. You were still calling in general, a family member that you loved, but it was these small little pieces that sort of helped keep us going that we didn't have anymore, which I think mirrors and mimics what happens for a lot of our older adults, that those are what's missing. Those small, again, bite-sized little connections that make it easier to sort of digest and not feel as overwhelmed. So if there are ways we can recreate that, again, these small pieces of connection.
I think we're also focusing a lot on connection with other people or with communities, but I think that a big piece is also with animals.
Yes, we have someone who, yes, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. I think animals, pet therapy is so important, can make a big difference. And a lot of folks can still live with pets and have pets with them, and some, even that's become challenging. So that can be a huge loss if you get to the point that you can't have your pet with you any longer. Yeah. But there are, again, how do we find ways where there are pet therapy? There are places that bring animals to you. Are there ways to get creative so that folks can engage with animals? Because I agree. Good suggestion. So how do we find these resources, right? It can be a little bit overwhelming. So there are so many resources in different communities. I will say that, and they're constantly changing. It's a little bit of a moving target. But if there's something in particular that you're interested in or that you know about, sign up for those newsletters, either in person or email, so that you see what's going on, right? You get the weekly digest, you get the monthly digest of all the different things that are happening. So you have sort of a landscape of what might be some options, right? And if you don't even know where to start, well, you're here tonight, right? So I don't know if these hyperlinks are going to work, but for both of the websites here, right? The ACAP's has a whole list of resources on their website where you could springboard from their website to lots of other community resources. And same with Senior Resources of Guilford. There was a whole list of other resources here in the community. So if you just sort of say, I don't even know where to start, that's a great place to start. Start with what you know. You know, I've heard of this one resource that I know of, this one agency. Let me look at their website and their resource page to help me have an idea of other things that are out there. Of course, there are community programs. Start with the ones that you're interested to learn more about. So if someone says, oh, I love animals, let me look at pet therapy in the area. Let me look at where I could foster animals for a short period of time. Let me look at taking my loved one to the cat cafe downtown in Greensboro, where they can watch cute little kitties run around. I adopted both my rescues from the cat cafe downtown. Shout out to Frickatail Cat Cafe. So yeah, if there are things that you are passionate about, that you love, that you're interested in, take a look and see. That's a great place to start. Of course, faith-based organizations and their programs can be a wonderful connection. If folks do have any religious connections, churches, temples, synagogues, mosques have wonderful, wonderful community programs. Not always religious. There are plenty that are informational, that are social to get folks connected. So if it's something that they're interested in, go with a buddy, go together, get a group. It's a great place to really begin to make some of those connections. And sometimes you meet other folks in those areas where then you start to build that social network and social engagement as you go. I love that the UNCG Gerontology Department has the Emeritus Society of Lifelong Learning. Anyone over 65 can take an audit course for free at UNCG.
You just sit in?
Just sit in. You just sit in. You do have to be in person, not online, which also kind of forces you to go. But again, if you're 65 or over, you can go and audit a course for free at UNCG. So I'm counting till I'm 65, and then I'm going to be there all the time, just learning.
What's the most popular class?
I don't know. I'll have to ask.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
See, I never knew they did that, and that's something I would be interested in.
Isn't that cool? I think it is so cool. So, yeah, and then you're on a college campus. Google is a great search engine, I know, but it's one of the first places where someone says, I don't know about, where would I find? Let's see what Google says. Let's try it. Let's see if there are things near me that have the thing we're talking about. Let's try Googling it and see if they have it. So we did talk about if there are more severe needs like depression, suicidal ideation, right? I know sometimes folks can be hesitant to connect with a professional, with a therapist. Depending on, as I'm talking with folks, one of the things I love to talk about is mentorship, right? That I think most of us have had mentors in our life, and our mentors need mentors, need mentors, need mentors, need mentors, need mentors. And a therapist is really a neutral sounding board to just process what's going on with your life, much like a mentor. but they're trained and they have these code of ethics, and we know that they're not going to do anything harmful. And if we have a lot going on in our life and we like to process verbally at all, it can be an amazing support. I think especially for those of us in the helping field, it can be really helpful to process what we see, because sometimes we can get secondary traumatic stress, and as caregivers, it can be hard as well. I love my therapist. I think she's amazing. So I encourage folks to get support. And if you don't even know where to start, psychologytoday.com. You can narrow the search by insurance. You can narrow the search by location. You can see this whole list of folks that in Greensboro who take your insurance, and you can see that there's photos, little blurbs about them, what they take. There's something just great about having that resource. There are apps as well. There is the SAMHSA Suicide Safe app. Of course, call 911 if someone is actively suicidal. There is a mobile crisis line as well. If you ever felt like you needed mobile crisis help, I could give you that information as well. Because I do want folks to make sure if you're dealing with someone who's actively suicidal that you get the support that you need. Let me give you the mobile crisis line. I have it saved in my phone because it's helpful to have.
988 is the National Suicide Hotline.
Well, there absolutely is 988, which is just great to know. Here in this area, if you need someone to come out, like you're having behavior challenges and folks are starting to get violent, you could, of course, call 911. Police can come, but if you also want some trained folks to come out to potentially de-escalate, it's the 877-626-1772 is mobile crisis. But yes, 988 is the suicide national number if you're needing support for.
So does Greensboro have a mental health team connected within public safety? Like Durham just started the HEART program, and we
That's
have
great.
40 members of the HEART team to respond to mental health crisis.
So I know Greensboro is starting to have ride-alongs of social workers with the police.
Got it, but not
to respond,
necessarily
but I don't-
instead of.
I don't think instead of. But there is the mobile crisis team as well, to just call mobile crisis to come out. But yeah, so. And of course, if you're talking about resources, talking to friends, talking to neighbors, talking to family members, talking to people you know, to say, hey, do you know about a resource for, a support group? Maybe some folks near you have some ideas. So, questions? I know we've had some all the way through, but any other questions at this point? Questions, comments, thoughts?
Thank you.
Thank you all for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Sure, you're welcome.
Thank you so much, Alicia. I have learned so much, and this is my field, This is great. Thank you all for being here as well. You gave us a great deal to think about, both in terms of why it's important to stay engaged and to socialize, and also some ways to get started if you're having some slow isolation happening,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Thank you so
Sure, you're welcome.
much. I want to thank our sponsor again, the Age Coach, and remind you that our meeting next month is on, and I can't see it. I think it's a whole list of upcoming programs that you're seeing on your screen now. Our program next month will be on Thursday, February 15th, but remember, we're meeting during the day now. So we will start at 11:30 for lunch. We do ask that you RSVP, that you sign up ahead of time so we know to expect you for lunch. We'll have some time to eat and talk, and then we'll start our program at noon. It'll run from noon to 1 o'clock. We'll have a presentation and conversation, like the wonderful ways that Alicia engaged us tonight. The topic next time is very different, but also one that's critically important we don't think about enough: exercise. Why do we need to stay physically active, and how do we do that? Alicia gave us a couple of hints about yoga. We'll see where we go with that next month. Again, register for lunch and for the upcoming program at acapcommunity.org. If you would like to be notified of our upcoming programs in general, like this list that you see on the screen now, please like us at our Facebook page at ACAP Guilford. Thank you again to Alicia Kaplan and to all of you for being with us tonight. And we'll see you next month. Good night.